CEO sees his daughter being taught by the black maid. His reaction will shock everyone. Richard Hale, a millionaire CEO, keeps his daughter Grace in a world of suffocating luxury. The mansion's glass walls reflected the Los Angeles sky like a giant mirror. Automatic doors, LED screen with stock quotes, jasmine fragrance dispersed by a smart diffuser. Everything flawless. Everything silent. Everything controlled. Disciplined people don't suffer, Richard said, adjusting his tie in front of the glass wall of the private meeting room. Pain is born from chaos. Grace, 10 years old, blonde, fair-skinned, blue eyes that had inherited the same coldness of the house, was sitting at the marble table trying to write. The pen trembled. The page remained blank. Her smartwatch beeped. Elevated heart rate. Elena Carter appeared at the door with a microfiber cloth in her hands. Black, beautiful, golden umber skin that caught the garden light, curly hair pulled into a high, elegant bun, honey-colored eyes watching with attentiveness and kindness. She didn't come in. She asked for permission with her eyes. "Just a second, Mr. Hale. May I?" Elena pointed to Grace's posture. If she rests her elbow, her hand will stop shaking. Richard didn't turn his head. "You're paid to clean, not to teach." The sentence cut the air. First shock. The chef stopped in the auxiliary kitchen. The housekeeper pretended to rearrange cutlery. Grace lowered her head. Elena took a deep breath. She didn't back down. "Excuse me," she said, approaching slowly. She touched Grace's elbow with her fingertips, a delicateness of someone who knows not to invade space. "Like this. Breathe. Count to 4. Grace inhaled. Her shoulders relaxed. The pen touched the paper. "Thank you," the girl whispered, more to Elena than to her father. Richard closed the laptop. "Elena, a word." Now down in the glass hallway that connected the room to the inner courtyard, the city looked like a distant set. Morning sunlight passed through everything, exposing dust and truth. He kept his voice low but firm. "Don't confuse kindness with authority. My daughter has a therapist, teachers, a pedagogical plan. I don't need improvisation." Elena held his gaze. "With all due respect, Mr. Hale, sometimes what a child needs isn't in the plan. It's here." She lightly touched her own chest, heart and rhythm. "If she breathes, she learns. Breathing is a function of the nervous system, not the staff." He smiled without humor. "You're excellent at what you do. Stay excellent at what you do. Second humiliation. Quick. Precise." Elena nodded, but her eyes didn't give in. "Understood, sir." She turned to leave. Before walking away, as if asking the glass for permission, she added, "Mrs. Hale used to play soft music when Grace would freeze. Batch, it worked." The forbidden's name passed through the house like a cold wind. The deceased wife. 3 years. Grief. Cast in rules. This subject is closed. Richard stepped back, as if the floor tilted. Get back to work. By late morning, the inner garden overflowed with light. The glass greenhouse was the only place in the mansion that breathed. Lavender plants, the scent of damp soil, the sound of water flowing in a minimalist fountain. Elena, wearing gardening gloves, was repotting a seedling. Her beauty drew even the bees, a calm, magnetic presence that didn't apologize for existing. Grace entered barefoot, silent. She sat on a bench and watched. "Can I help?" she asked, almost a whisper. Elena smiled with her eyes. "Of course. Come. Soil like small hands. My dad thinks everything fragile needs a frame," said Grace, gently touching the seedling. "But this here, it lives without a frame, right? Some things grow better when we stop squeezing." Elena placed the soil around the root. "Sometimes we just protect, not control. You could teach me to breathe like before. Grace looked at the greenhouse, with music. Elena hesitated. She looked at the glass ceiling and at the discreet camera in the corner. Nothing in that house was just theirs. "We can try without music," she replied, avoiding a direct challenge to authority. "Look at the water. Let your body follow the sound." Grace closed her eyes, inhaled, counted. Her chest came down lighter. A hint of joy appeared at the corner of her mouth. "Better," said Elena. "Now think of a word that doesn't scare you." "Batch," Grace whispered, like a secret. Elena didn't smile. Respect for grief was also a rule. "Let it be courage. Courage." Grace repeated, and now the voice came from a whole place. Lunch was quiet, but the mansion wasn't. The corporate Alexa read market reports. An email flashing urgent audit popped up on Richard's tablet. He didn't open it. He preferred to control what he could: cutlery, schedules, posture. "How were your assignments?" he asked, not looking at his daughter. "Better," said Grace. Elena taught Mum. Richard raised his hand. Elena cleaned the greenhouse. "What taught you was the school's program." And to the housekeeper, "From now on, Elena does not enter the study room without authorization." The housekeeper nodded. Elena, at the end of the table, stood up. "Understood." "You don't need to say 'understood' every time I say something," Richard snapped. "Just do it. That's enough." Third wound. Small, precise. Elena breathed and remained silent, but her silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation. In the afternoon, the house dozed off a little. Blazing sun, reflections dancing on the walls. Grace was in the study room, facing her notebook. The glass let the city through, the cars, the distant noise of helicopters. She began to write. The door opened. Elena didn't enter. She just leaned her shoulder on the doorframe and, with a soft voice, offered an image, not an order. "Picture your mother on the Santa Monica Pier, that wind that sounded like laughter." 3 lines about that, short, no right or wrong. Grace smiled. The words came, simple. "Wind that holds our hand. Salt that heals. Sun that doesn't hurt." She read it aloud, feeling each syllable. "Beautiful," said Elena, moved in a way that didn't need applause. "Now close your eyes and trust what you already know." That's when the camera sensor blinked. In the office, across the hallway, Richard's tablet vibrated. Motion detected, study room, audio enabled. He tapped the screen. The image appeared. He saw his daughter, heard Elena, and saw a look of peace on Grace's face that he didn't recognize. "No." The word came out sharp. He stood so quickly the chair scraped the floor. He walked down the hallway like someone cutting through water with their body. Each step a decree. When he entered the room, there was no yelling. There was control, and that was worse. "Close your notebook, Grace." The girl obeyed, hands trembling. "You too, Elena. Leave." Elena lifted her chin. "I was just help. You were occupying a place that doesn't belong to you." He stepped forward, low, firm. "In this house, everyone has a role. Yours is clear." Grace jumped to her feet. "Don't talk to her like that, Grace." The warning cut like a blade. "Sit down." "No." Grace's hands were shaking, but her voice wasn't. "When you talk to her like that, it's like I don't exist. I'm the one who freezes. I'm the one who can't breathe. She's the one who helps me." The silence was heavy. The glass reflected their images back at them, cruelly. Elena touched Grace's shoulder, asking for calm. "I'll leave," she said, trying to protect the girl. "It's okay." "It's not," Grace answered, with a new kind of courage. "If she leaves, I won't go back to school." She swallowed her tears. "And there's something you need to hear." Richard clenched his fists. "What?" Grace took a deep breath like Elena had taught her. Her blue eyes, moist, looked at her father. With adult seriousness. I found something of Mom's, and I wasn't supposed to. The air felt light and heavy at the same time. Richard lost a step. Elena felt danger rise like a storm in the glass. What are you talking about, Grace? His voice faltered, almost imperceptibly. The girl pulled an old, time-worn card from her pocket but didn't open it. If I show you, everything changes. The camera in the room blinked again. Richard's tablet vibrated with the same persistent alert. Motion detected, main entrance, restricted access. Someone had just passed through the mansion's gate without authorization. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching this story from? Write it in the comments. I like to see how far our stories can reach. And if you enjoy following intense, emotional stories full of twists and love lessons, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll not only receive each new episode firsthand, but also help this work grow and motivate me to bring you more stories. Now let's move on, because what comes next will move you even more. The alert was still flashing on Richard's tablet when Grace lifted her chin and with a choked voice recited, "Wind that holds our hand, salt that heals, sun that doesn't hurt." The words vibrated in the glass-walled study room where the light scent of lemon cleaner mingled with the hum of the air conditioner. Elena, near the door, stood tall. Beautiful, golden umber skin glowing under the morning light, curly hair and a perfect bun. Honey-colored eyes locked on the girl. Richard crossed the room with sharp steps over the polished concrete floor. His luxury watch glinted on his wrist. Where did that come from? He asked without looking at Elena. Grace hesitated. Elena taught him enough. He turned cold. You're crossing your boundaries. His gaze landed on Elena like a sentence. You're trying to take someone's place that doesn't belong to you. The humiliation fell like a blade. The chef, in the side kitchen, stopped stirring the pot. The housekeeper adjusted an imaginary napkin. The whole mansion seemed to hold its breath. Elena didn't lower her eyes. I taught her how to breathe and to put her feelings into words. That's all. That's all? Richard pointed to the marble table, to the discrete cameras on the ceiling, to the tablet showing charts and alerts. This house has rules, protocols, qualified professionals. We don't turn the study room into a therapy circle. This isn't a charity. Your staff. Grace stepped forward, small in front of the infinite window. She helps me not freeze. Count to 4, remember? She looked at Elena, searching for breath. 4 beats. I can do it. Richard kept his voice restrained, and that hurt more. Mrs. Carter cleaned the greenhouse. Your teachers are at school. Period. Elena inhaled slowly, as if reminding her body it existed. If I got the delivery wrong, I apologize. But the intention was to care. Children need care to learn. Care I can buy. Boundaries I demand. He tapped his smartwatch. From now on, you're not allowed in this room without written authorization. Badge access blocked to the study wing. The housekeeper will coordinate with HR. The second humiliation came with the formality of corporate life, something Richard understood better than people. Grace trembled. Dad, please. MOM, don't use your mother to defend someone who doesn't know their place. The chill in his tone cracked the memory. Your mother knew where everyone belonged. The silence became thicker than the glass. Elena breathed and, in a gentle gesture, stepped closer to Grace. Look at me, she said softly. Breathe. 4 beats. Watch the water in the fountain. Grace closed her eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her chest lowered. When she opened her eyes, there was courage. Elena taught me not to feel ashamed of feeling. You weren't here when I froze. Richard stood taller, as if height could prove him right. I was paying every therapist you rejected. They didn't listen to me. The girl held the paper tightly. She does. Elena held her own hand, hiding the tremor. If you prefer, I won't teach poems anymore. Just don't take from her what works. Works for who? Richard threw a look that measured people like reports. For the conscience of someone who wants to be a hero? You were hired to keep things in order, not to replace a mother. The word replace, even unfinished, cut deep. Elena lifted her chin, wounded and whole. I would never take a mother's place. I was just where the pain asked me to be. Grace took another step, now between them, a small wall. I asked, me, if anyone made a mistake, it was me. The tablet vibrated again on the side table. Motion at the front gate. The alert light reflected on Richard's face. He ignored it. He needed to win here. Hand over your badge, he ordered, his hand outstretched toward Elena. She pulled a worn-edged ID card from her pocket, paused halfway, looked at Grace. I stay as long as you need, she told the girl with a sweetness that didn't beg. Then placed the badge on the table, slowly, like laying down a truth. And if I leave, that doesn't erase what you've learned. Grace couldn't take it. Don't do this. The words came out tight, caught in a cry she held back. If she leaves, I am not going back to school today. I can't. Richard tried to contain the tremble in his jaw. Grace, there are consequences. There's one you need to face. The girl opened the crumpled paper she had brought in her pocket. It was an old card with feminine handwriting, faded ink, and a smudge of perfume that seemed to have survived time. I found it in Mom's closet. It was meant for me when I turned 10. Richard's breath faltered. What's in there? Grace read. Steady, as if her voice was lending her heart a moment of rest. When you freeze, look for someone who really sees you. The world will try to teach you how to be perfect. I want you to learn how to be whole. The girl looked up. Elena really sees. May. For a moment, the mansion lost its posture. The glass reflected a man who no longer felt sure of anything. Richard clenched his hand into a fist, but control was slipping. That doesn't change the fact that there are boundaries. He reached for what he knew. I won't allow confusion between affection and function. That's how bigger problems begin. Elena never confused me, Grace replied with a maturity beyond her years. What confuses things is thinking love comes with an ID badge. The housekeeper, standing in the hallway, dropped a utensil. The metallic sound marked the moment. Richard regained his executive tone. Mrs. Carter, you're suspended until further notice. Security will escort you to the gate. Elena nodded, unbroken. She picked up her simple beige knit coat. Before turning her back, she spoke without harshness, but with firmness. I'm not your enemy, Mr. Hale. I'm the hand that holds on until the storm passes. The intercom lit up. The guard's voice came through the room. Mr. Hale, Dr. Daniel. Rivera is at the entrance. Says it's urgent. Richard narrowed his eyes for a second. I didn't authorize visitors. He showed legal credentials from the company. He insists he needs to speak now. Grace looked at Elena, a new glimmer between fear and hope. Is it about the audit? She guessed, remembering the email that flashed earlier. Elena stepped back, ready to leave. Richard opened the study room door with the same energy he used to open a shareholders meeting. Make him wait in the hall. The door remained open. From the hallway flooded with light, a male figure approached, tall, firm, with a kind of truth in his eyes that didn't ask for permission. His voice came before his body. There's no time to wait, Richard. Grace's heart sped up. Elena felt the world shift a centimeter. And Richard, for the first time in a long time, wasn't sure he could control the next scene. The hallway door opened before Richard could issue the final command. Daniel Rivera walked in with steady steps, carrying the contrast of someone coming from the street, the real world, into that glass mansion. He was 34, light brown skin, dark brown wavy hair slightly tousled from urgency, deep brown eyes radiating warmth even in a cold room. His plain gray suit didn't have the millionaire cut of Richard's, but on him it felt more genuine. Richard, he said, without waiting for an invitation, I'm not here to talk about balance sheets or contracts. I saw what happened in the study. Roomed out the air cut like a knife. Richard clenched his jaw. This is an internal matter. No need for a lawyer's intervention. Daniel stayed calm, but his eyes didn't shy away from the confrontation. When a child tries to speak and isn't heard, it stops being just an internal matter. He turned to Grace, who was still holding the old card. May I? The girl nodded, her eyes full of tears. Daniel approached slowly, as if respecting sacred ground. He took the card, read the words from her mother, and gently handed it back. She's right. What Elena did wasn't crossing boundaries. It was answering a silent call. For help. Help. Richard took a step back. You're taking the side of a staff member against me in my own home? It's not against you, Richard, Daniel answered firmly. It's for Grace. It's for humanity. You demand discipline, but discipline without affection becomes a prison. Elena, silent until then, felt the words echo inside her as if someone had just translated her soul. Her chest, tight from the humiliations, found room to breathe. Richard pointed at Elena. You don't know the rules of this house. I do. I decide. Daniel didn't back down. Rules don't build bonds. People do. He looked directly at Elena, recognizing her strength and not breaking. She didn't invade anything. She just held the hand that was trembling. Elena's eyes shimmered not with tears, but surprise. She was used to carrying her burdens alone, never seeing someone like Daniel raise their voice for her. An unexpected warmth ran through her chest, as if an invisible promise had just been made. Grace ran to the lawyer and grabbed the sleeve of his suit. He's saying what I wanted to say. Richard took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Daniel, you're stepping out of line. If you want to keep your position, choose your words wisely. The lawyer stood his ground. My position means nothing compared to a child's life. Silence grew heavier. The glass reflected three different worlds. Richard, rigid. Elena, hurt but standing. And Daniel, a bridge between them. Then the intercom lit up again. The guard's voice sounded urgent. Mr. Hale, there's a journalist at the front gate. Says he has evidence about the ongoing audit. Richard felt the blood drain from his face. Daniel looked him in the eye. It's not just inside this house that your decisions are being questioned. Elena held her breath, and Grace clutched the card from her mother even tighter. The balance of that family was about to collapse, and now it wasn't just within four walls. Richard slammed the door shut, muffling the sound of the intercom still buzzing with the journalist's presence outside. On his face, the fury masked something deeper, fear. Fear of losing control not only over the company, but over the one thing he still believed he had power over, his daughter's life. That evening at dinner, the marble table was set as always. Candles lit, glasses aligned. Food prepared by the French chef. But the air was heavy. Grace sat still in front of her grilled salmon. She didn't touch her fork. Just pushed the mashed potatoes from side to side. Richard lifted his eyes from the tablet. Grace, eat. I'm not hungry. You need discipline. If you don't eat, you won't have energy for school tomorrow. The girl crossed her arms. I'd rather have no energy than be without Elena. The silence hit louder than any silverware. Elena, standing in the back by the glass wall, felt her heart tighten. She was forbidden from stepping in, but her eyes met Grace's for a second. A gaze full of tenderness and helplessness. Richard noticed and raised his voice, controlled, but sharp. Starting today, Elena will only perform domestic duties: cleaning, organizing, laundry. Nothing more." Grace burst out, her voice choked with emotion. "You don't understand. I need her. She's the only one who listens to me." "Enough!" Richard snapped, slamming his open palm on the table. The crystal glasses rattled. "I am your father, and no one here will confuse the roles." The girl stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the polished floor. "Then maybe I don't need a father." She ran down the glass hallway, her footsteps echoing like an open wound. Richard remained still, breathing heavily, trying to hide how shaken he was. Elena, standing tall, gathered the courage to speak. "Mr. Hale, with respect." Pushing her away from someone she trusts might make things worse. He turned slowly. "Are you questioning my orders again?" "No." Her voice came out steady, even with a lump in her throat. "I'm just saying what I see. Children don't only need rules. They need space to feel." Richard stepped closer, facing her directly. His blue-gray eyes reflected more fear than anger. "And what if she clings to you so much that I become invisible? What will be left of my role as a father?" Elena held her breath. She wanted to say he was confusing love with control, but she knew that would cost her the job. So she only replied, "What's left is to be a real father." The silence that followed was a minefield. Richard turned his back without another word. Hours later, late at night, Elena slipped quietly into the service room, small and simple, a stark contrast to the mansion's luxury suites. She sat on the narrow bed, took off her shoes, and held her phone. The screen lit up her tired, beautiful face. There were 3 unread messages from the pharmacy, reminders about her mother's unpaid medication bill. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She couldn't lose this job. Not yet. Dignity hurt, but the need was heavier. Upstairs, Grace remained locked in her room. The food tray sat untouched by the door. In the office, Richard stared at the old card his daughter had shown him, one from his late wife. The delicate handwriting seemed to accuse him. "Look for someone who truly sees you." He closed his fist around the paper, battling a knot he didn't want to admit. Maybe he was the invisible one in that house. Outside, the red lights of the security cameras blinked. The journalist still lurked near the gates, searching for the truth that could bring Richard's empire down. And inside the mansion, each heart beat to a different rhythm. The father's at war with his own fear, the daughter's in silent rebellion, and Elena's carrying alone the weight of a house that wasn't hers. But that night, unnoticed by everyone, Daniel Rivera remained outside in his car, watching discreetly. He knew that family was on the verge of collapse, and that he might be called to intervene again, not just as a lawyer, but as a man. The rain fell softly over Los Angeles, sliding down the mansion's glass walls, drawing silver streaks under the glow of the exterior spotlights. The garden, usually lit by subtle lighting, looked like another world that night. The fountain was overflowing with rainwater, and the scent of wet earth mixed with the perfume of night flowers. Elena walked barefoot on the soaked lawn. Her blue uniform, now damp, clung to her skin, and her high bun had begun to unravel under the drizzle. She held her pain in her arms, trying not to sob out loud. Richard's words still echoed like open wounds. "You're trying to take someone's place that doesn't belong to you." She leaned against the trunk of a tall tree, closed her eyes, and let her tears mix with the rain. "Why does everything I do feel wrong?" she whispered to herself. A quiet sound made her turn. Firm footsteps were coming down the stone path. It was Daniel Rivera. He had taken off his jacket, his white shirt soaked and clinging to him, dark brown hair wet and sticking to his forehead. But his eyes remained intense, reflecting more than the rain-dashed compassion. "Elena," he called in a low, respectful tone. Sorry to interrupt. I heard when you left. I figured you might need silence. She tried to pull herself together, but her voice came out choked. This is the only place I can be myself, where no one looks at me like I'm just staff. Daniel walked closer, stopping just a few steps away. I saw what happened today. I saw you protect Grace with your heart, even when you were humiliated. Her eyes filled again. He thinks I want to replace her mother, but all I do is try to ease the girl's pain. And even that feels like too much. Daniel took a deep breath, as if drawing courage from his own memories. I grew up in East LA. My mom cleaned houses, just like you. I helped after school. I knew what it was like to feel like you didn't belong anywhere. He paused, eyes locked on hers. But my mom taught me something. Dignity doesn't depend on a paycheck. She used to say our beauty is the one thing no one can buy. Elena lowered her gaze, touched by the confession. You talk like you understand me. I do. He took another step forward, the rain now outlining the strong shape of his face. And it's not just because of your courage, Elena. It's because of who you are. You have a beauty that doesn't fade. Even when people try to silence your voice, her heart raced. She wasn't used to being seen like this. She tried to turn away, but her voice broke. Don't say that. If someone hears, Daniel gave a slight smile, one more sad than bold. I don't care who hears. The truth doesn't need permission. For a moment, time seemed suspended. Rain fell through the treetops, wind stirred the branches, and only the two of them stood there, breathing in the same rhythm. Elena felt her strength to hold in the pain begin to weaken, and in that space, something different and unexpected was born. I can't lose this job, she confessed, her voice cracking. My mother depends on me, the medications. Without this money, she has no chance. Daniel stepped closer, but didn't touch her. He let his voice be the embrace. You're not alone. Not anymore. Elena's eyes met his. There was warmth. There was steadiness. There was a promise. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. Visible. Suddenly, a metallic noise echoed from outside the mansion gate. Daniel turned sharply. A silhouette seemed to move in the darkness beyond the fence. Elena held her breath. Did you see that? She whispered. I did. Daniel narrowed his eyes, serious. If that's not security. Someone's watching this house. The wind carried the faint sound of footsteps running along the sidewalk. And the rainy night, which had promised only comfort, now hid a new danger. The rain from the night before gave way to a clear, starry sky. The glass mansion glowed like an illuminated palace, prepared to welcome business people, politicians, and celebrities from LA's elite. The grand hall shimmered under crystal chandeliers reflecting off champagne flutes, while a string quartet played softly in the background. It was more than just a party. It was the stage where Richard Hale would reassert his power before high society, trying to silence the rumors swirling around the audit threatening his company. Elena walked among the guests with her usual discretion. Dressed in her immaculate blue uniform, hair pinned up carefully, her beauty drawing glances even when she tried to hide. She wasn't a guest, just staff, but wherever she was, Grace's eyes found her. The girl, in a white silk dress, looked suffocated among so many strangers. At the main table, Richard raised his glass for a toast. To the partnerships that sustain us, the discipline that builds us, and the trust that keeps us strong. His voice echoed with confidence, but his eyes scanned the room, alert to reactions, like a man clinging to control. Grace, however, couldn't even swallow the juice in her delicate glass. The stares, the rules, the forced silence. It all weighed on her, until, suddenly, she stood up and ran, ignoring the murmurs. Grace, Richard called, his voice firm. But the girl didn't stop. She ran down the hallway, her white dress dragging across the marble. She was looking for just one thing, Elena. She found her in the inner garden, quietly arranging flowers for the decor. Grace threw herself into her arms, crying, "I can't take it anymore. They talk about business, but no one talks about me. You're the only one who teaches me how to really live." The cry echoed against the glass. Nearby guests stopped, alarmed. In seconds, the scene became public. The host's daughter in the maid's arms, declaring love and trust in front of all the elite. A wave of murmuring spread through the hall. Some ladies raised their eyebrows. Businessmen exchanged uneasy glances. The music stopped. The scandal had arrived. Richard crossed the space with firm steps, his face red not just with anger, but with shame. He grabbed his daughter's arm. "Grace, let her go now." The girl clung tighter to Elena. "No. You don't understand, Dad. I need her." Elena tried to intervene, her voice low but firm. "Mr. Hale, please, don't expose her like this. Be quiet." The order hit hard, in front of everyone. Richard pointed toward the exit, each syllable a blow. "You're fired, right now. Get out of my house." A heavy silence overtook the hall. The string quartet lowered their instruments. Everyone watched, some with discomfort, others with cruel delight. Elena took a deep breath, eyes full but unbroken. She adjusted her bun and with dignity, gently let Grace go. "You'll be okay, little one. Trust yourself," the girl sobbed. "No, if she goes, I'm going too." Richard pulled her closer, ignoring the crying. "Enough drama. You're confused." That's when Daniel Rivera emerged from the crowd. He had come to represent the company, but witnessing that scene lit a fire in his blood. He walked toward Elena, facing Richard with resolve. "This isn't just drama, Richard. It's your daughter asking for help, and you're punishing the only person who truly hears her." Richard glared, wounded pride boiling. "Stay out of this. It's a private matter." Daniel's voice stayed calm, but steady. "I'm not interfering. I'm walking Elena to the gate so she doesn't face the shame you're trying to throw on her alone." "The shame isn't hers, Richard. It's yours." The murmurs grew. A few bold guests clapped quietly. Elena's heart pounded. No one had ever stood up for her like that, not in public, not before the elite. She walked to the door with Daniel beside her. With each step, eyes followed like knives and like witnesses. As she passed through the large iron gate, the cold night wrapped around her. Daniel took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders, damp from the mist. "You're not alone. You won't face this alone." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, dignity intact even in pain. His gesture warmed something inside her that she didn't want to admit, but could no longer ignore. A bond had been born. Inside the mansion, Richard tried to resume the toast, but his hand trembled around the glass. Grace, locked in her room, cried like someone who had just lost everything. And the guests, whispering among themselves, knew that night had stained more than a party. It had stained the image of an empire. The echoes of the party hadn't faded when headlines started popping up across every digital news site. Scandal at Hale Tech, fraudulent contracts under federal investigation. Richard's photo raising his glass the night before was plastered everywhere, a symbol of arrogance on the brink of collapse. The next morning, the mansion felt like a different place. The guards who once stood proudly had been dismissed. Luxury cars quietly left, carrying guests who had stayed for the weekend. The phone rang nonstop, but the calls from important friends were nothing more than cold messages. "It's best if you lay low until this is resolved." Richard was locked in his office, staring at screens showing plummeting graphs. The color of his face blended with the gray of the monitors. Daniel, summoned as the company's lawyer, kept his composure, but the tension showed. "Richard, we have to talk to the press." "Silence only makes it worse." "I'm not putting on a show for vultures," Richard growled. "I've always controlled everything. I'll control this too." Daniel held his gaze. This isn't about control anymore. It's about survival. Meanwhile, upstairs, the real tragedy was unfolding. Grace lay in bed, feverish, refusing food, waving off the housekeeper with a tired hand. Her room, softly lit through white curtains, felt suffocating. The bowl of soup beside her had already gone cold. "Miss Grace, please," the housekeeper begged. "Just one sip." "No," the girl murmured, her eyes full of tears. "I want Elena," the phrase repeated like a mantra. "I want Elena." Richard entered the room, his rigid posture collapsing before his daughter. He sat at the edge of the bed, reaching to stroke her blonde hair, but Grace pulled away. "Sweetheart, I'm here. You're not who I need." Her voice was weak, but cutting. "You don't listen. You just order." Richard closed his eyes, swallowing hard. For the first time, authority meant nothing. He held up the plate. "Please, Grace. Just a little. If it's not Elena, I don't want anything." The tears nearly came, but he stood before anyone could see. In the hallway, he leaned against the glass wall, feeling the weight of the world collapse on his shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. Downstairs, the phone rang again. Richard picked up. The voice of an old business partner came cold and sharp. "Richard, I'm sorry, but we can no longer be associated with Hale Tech. It's toxic for our shareholders." He tried to argue. "You know this is temporary, a political smear. Maybe. But no one's going to risk their name for you. You're on your own." The line went dead. Richard let the phone slip from his hand. The thud of the device hitting the floor echoed in the thud taud in the vendetta. Silence. The empire he once believed indestructible was beginning to crumble, and nothing he said or bought could stop it. Daniel walked in slowly. "She needs Elena, and so do you, even if you won't admit it." Richard lifted his head, his eyes hardened but tired. "I will never allow that woman to come back. Never." Then prepare to lose more than just the company. "Richard." Upstairs, Grace's crying pierced through the glass, slicing the air like a warning. The fall wasn't just financial, it was personal. Outside, journalists crowded the gates, cameras pointed, microphones ready to capture the ruin of a man who, inside, was already starting to collapse. The next morning arrived heavy, with an overcast sky and the mansion quieter than ever. Grace was still in her room, feverish, refusing to open her mouth to anyone. The housekeeper came in twice, but the girl just turned her face to the wall. Richard, exhausted, had spent the night in the office trying to reply to emails from furious shareholders. None of his answers seemed to be enough. The doorbell rang through the grand hall. Richard came down the stairs with a hard expression, expecting more reporters at the door. But when the glass door opened, there stood Daniel Rivera and next to him Elena. She no longer wore the blue uniform. She had on a simple light cotton dress, her hair loose in natural waves, her face tired but glowing. Even in that tense moment, her beauty seemed to light up the space. Daniel stood firm. "Richard," the lawyer said without preamble, "Grace won't get better without her. You can ignore the press, try to hold the company up alone, but you can't save your daughter unless you allow Elena to be here." Richard tightened his jaw. "She's not coming back into this house." Elena took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I didn't come back as an employee, Mr. Hale. I won't sweep your halls or accept orders that belittle me. I came back as your daughter's friend. If that's the only way you'll accept it." The silence in the hall weighed heavy. Richard's eyes scanned Elena from head to toe, not with contempt, but with something he tried to hide: discomfort. You think you can set conditions in this house? It's not about setting conditions, she replied, steady. It's about respect. I'll only stay if there's respect for me and for what Grace feels. Daniel added, Richard, you don't have a choice. Grace is getting worse. The price of your stubbornness could be too high. The words hit like an invisible punch. Richard looked away, took a deep breath, and for the first time gave in. Fine, but I want clear boundaries. Elena nodded, standing tall. My boundary is simple. No humiliation. I help Grace, and you observe. Maybe you'll realize that when someone teaches love, they're not a threat. Upstairs, as if she had heard every word, Grace appeared at the top of the stairs. Fragile, wearing a cotton dress, eyes full of tears. Elena, her voice cracked. Elena opened her arms, and the girl ran down, fever forgotten, throwing herself into her neck with a strength that made Richard flinch. Grace whispered, I thought I'd never see you again. I promised I'd be with you whenever you needed me, Elena said. Stroking her damp blonde hair. Richard watched the scene, unmoving. Something in his chest fought against pride. The memory of his wife's card came back like a ghost. Look for someone who truly sees you. For the first time, he understood what that meant. That night's dinner was different. Elena sat beside Grace, helping her eat small spoonfuls of soup. Richard stayed quiet, his eyes on his daughter, but inevitably, they kept shifting to Elena. Every gesture she made, every calm word, exposed the cruel contrast. Everything she gave, he hadn't been able to despite all his money and rules. In the end, Grace smiled for the first time in days. Daddy, Elena said I can write about how I feel instead of keeping it all inside. That helps me. Richard looked at her, swallowing hard. If that makes you smile, then maybe it's what you should do. Elena lowered her eyes, not flaunting victory. Daniel, watching from a distance, crossed his arms, content. He knew this was only the beginning of an inevitable change, but outside the mansion walls, the press remained camped out, and documents about the company's corruption were spreading. Like gunpowder waiting to explode. The following days brought a subtle change within the mansion. Grace, now more energetic, started smiling again in small ways, writing in her blue-covered notebook, reading aloud the simple poems Elena suggested, and laughing when Daniel, during his frequent visits, tried to recite them with an intentionally heavy accent. The fever was gone, but the emptiness that once made her sick seemed to be slowly filled with a new kind of hope. That late afternoon, the garden was damp with dew. Elena walked slowly among the flowers, her light dress swaying in the breeze when Daniel approached with 2 steaming cups of tea. He handed her one, smiling. You've worked all day. At least let me take care of you now, he said, eyes locked on hers. Elena looked down, trying to hide the blush. I'm not used to being taken care of. I've always been the one holding everyone else. Then maybe it's time someone held you. Daniel's voice was soft but firm like a promise. They walked side by side across the lawn. They talked about childhood, about interrupted dreams, and the weight of choices. Daniel shared stories about helping his mother study English, sitting at the counter of a small diner. Elena opened up about leaving college to support the household after her mother's illness worsened. There was a bond growing, not born from luxury, but from shared pain. With each revelation, their eyes met with more depth. Richard watched from a distance, through the glass walls of the living room. His hands were clasped behind his back, his hard expression failing to hide his unease. He saw his daughter more alive when she was near Elena, and saw Elena more radiant when she was near Daniel. And he felt something shift inside him, something he didn't want to admit. Maybe he was witnessing a kind of love that money could never buy. On a rainy night, Grace insisted everyone gather in the living room to listen to the sound of the water hitting the glass. "It sounds like music," she said, lying on Elena's lap. Daniel sat beside them, close enough that Elena could feel the warmth of his shoulder. Richard broke the silence, his voice softer than usual. "She never laughed like that. Not even when her mother was alive." Elena looked up at him. "It's not about replacing someone. It's about being present." Richard nodded, swallowing his resistance. For the first time, he didn't push back. Later, that same night, after putting Grace to bed, Elena walked through the garden to breathe. Daniel followed her. The rain had stopped, and the fresh air carried the scent of jasmine. He reached for her hand gently, as if asking permission. "Elena, I admire your courage. I admire the way you turn pain into strength. But most of all, I admire the woman you are. Not for being here, but for existing the way you do." Her heart raced. She tried to pull her hand back, but Daniel held it. With tenderness, "You don't have to answer now," he added. "I just want you to know you're not alone. Not anymore." Elena sighed, torn between fear and longing. "I don't know if I can allow myself to feel something like this. Everything in my life has always had a price, a limit, a condition. This is the only feeling that doesn't ask for conditions," Daniel replied, looking into her eyes. "Before any final words could be said, the sound of a car braking in front of the mansion gates shattered the peace. Headlights cut through the glass, and raised voices echoed from outside. Reporters had broken through the entrance, shouting questions about the fraudulent contracts. Richard came running down the hallway, his face twisted in fury and fear. "They found more than I expected. If it's true, there's no way out." Months passed since that night when headlights and journalists surrounded the mansion. The Hale tech scandal deeply shook Richard's empire, but unlike what many expected, he didn't run. Under pressure, he was forced to open the files, face hearings, and return contracts that once ensured his dominance. Many abandoned him, but in that forced solitude, he found a new path. The company was restructured. Richard dismissed corrupt advisors, brought in young talent, and gave Daniel a central role in legal affairs, ensuring transparency. The building once known for cold meetings now hosted social programs, internships for underprivileged youth, and partnerships with community organizations. Inside his home, the change was even more visible. Grace blossomed. She went back to school, regained her confidence, and began writing stories her mother would have loved to read. On the mansion's once cold walls, there were now her drawings, poems taped up, and even laughter during meals. Elena was always there, but not as a maid. She was a guest. She was family. On a sunny afternoon, Richard gathered employees and partners at the company's newly renovated headquarters. Grace sat in the front row, Elena and Daniel by her side. He stepped onto the small stage, not with the arrogant glow of the past, but with the tearful eyes of someone who had learned the hardest way. For a long time, he began, his voice tight. "I believe power meant control. That discipline and silence were the keys to holding everything together. But silence can kill you. From the inside. And I almost lost what was most precious to me." His eyes searched for his daughters. Grace smiled softly, like someone who finally recognized her father. "That's when I realized," he continued, taking a deep breath, "true power doesn't come from money or contracts. True power comes from learning to listen to the voices the world keeps trying to silence." The room fell silent, and many employees bowed their heads, moved. Richard paused, then concluded, "Dignity has no color, no class, no social status. Love and respect are the forces that change lives. And I am living proof of that." Grace stood and ran to the stage, hugging her father. In front of everyone, the gesture drew spontaneous applause. Elena, emotional, discreetly wiped away a tear. Daniel held her hand, intertwining their fingers, no longer hiding what they both felt. After the event, in the company garden, Richard approached Elena and Daniel. Pride had given way to humility. "You have my blessing," he said, voice steady, though his eyes glistened. "Elena, thank you for giving me my daughter back. Daniel, thank you for reminding me that justice begins at home." Elena shook Richard's hand with a calm smile. "You don't owe me anything. You owe everything to the courage to listen." Daniel added, "and the courage to change." That night, Elena and Daniel walked together through the mansion garden. Grace watched from the balcony, smiling, as if she already knew what was coming. The wind blew gently, carrying not just the scent of flowers, but the promise of a different future. So, what did you think of this story? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Leave your rating in the comments from 0 to 10. Your feedback means a lot to me. If you liked it, give the video a like, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel to follow more moving stories like this one. And before you go, I've already picked out another story that's even more intense and emotional. I'm sure it will touch your heart deeply.